So that's captured various bits of information. What I'm going to do now is to build up a formatted string to display in the result label. So I'll declare myself a string variable, and we'll use the string format function to build up the formatted string. So we'll specify the name as the first piece of information, and the age as the second piece of information, and the nationality as the next bit of information. And then also we'll specify whether the user can program in VB, C#, and J# as determined by the checkboxes. So we'll say VB equals the third item, or the fourth item really, and C# is the next item, and J# is the final item in our display. So that's the string format. So let's pull in some values. So the first value is going to be the person's name. That's our name variable. And then we'll have the person's age. And then we'll have the person's nationality. And then what we'll do is we'll get the checked status for each of the checkboxes in turn. So first of all, we have the VB checkbox. And it's an instance of the checkbox class, HTML input checkbox. And that class has a property called checked. So that'll tell us whether the user checked that checkbox or not. And likewise, we can do the same for C#. And finally for J#. Okay, so that's our formatted string. All we need to do now is to put that into our result label. So let's do that. Result label. Now at this point, there's an inner text property you can set. This sets the inner text for the label, and we'll set that to be the result. So that's our event handler. I think it's time to run the application again now and see if it works. So let's go back up to debug and start without debugging. Okay, so I'll enter my name. So that's still handy. Nationality. So I think I'm going to become Albanian for this example. My age is still 21, and my languages are still VB and C#. When I click the button, hopefully that should invoke the event handler, which should populate the result label on the screen. Marvellous, there we are, great. So we've seen how to use the various HTML controls. They're quite limited. It involves a fair amount of interaction and swapping back and forth between the design view, where we specify the basic attributes for the controls, and then in the source view, where we have to go in and add bits where the designer isn't capable of doing what we want. So that's the disadvantage of using HTML controls. The plus side is that they're quite straightforward. The downside is you have to do quite a lot of work yourself to achieve the effect that you want. Also, the important point I made earlier, you really need to set the run@server attribute on each of your controls so that you can access the controls via a .NET object in your code in event handlers. Just one last point before we move on. On the help system, if you're curious, you can see exactly what properties and events and methods are available on these different classes. So I'll select help index, and here, for example, if I type in HTML input text control. So that will give me information and help about the HTML input text control. Let's double click there. And it shows you what various attributes you're allowed to specify and gives you a bit of an idea of what they mean. We've obviously handled some of these, but not all of them. And if I just scroll up a little in the list, you can also, if you want to, take a look at the corresponding HTML input text class. Let's do that. So this tells us that the class is called HTML input text, and it specifies the namespace. So it's in a namespace called System Web UI HTML Controls. All of the HTML control classes are in this namespace, as you might imagine. We can have a look at all the members for the class. So we have various public properties. And we have various protected properties. And we have some methods, but not many. Okay, well, I'll leave it there, and we'll close this example.